We all have this picture in our heads of the fall of Rome, right? Barbarians crashing through the gates, total chaos, civilization just crumbling into dust. But what if that's not really how it went down? What if it wasn't just some grand, tragic ending, but actually a beginning? That's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to look at how that massive world of emperors, legions, all those incredible aqueducts didn't just vanish into thin air. It actually morphed into something completely new, the very foundation of the Middle Ages.
So let's just start with a huge question. How does a world end? I mean, really, does it just go out with one big boom, a sudden catastrophic collapse, or is it maybe something a little slower, a lot messier, and here's the kicker, maybe even a little bit creative? Well, the story of what happened to Rome gives us one heck of an answer.
And get this whole transformation, it happened incredibly fast. I mean, just look at this 100-year window. We kick things off in 395, when the empire officially splits in two. Fast forward just 15 years to 410, and boom, the unthinkable happens. Rome itself gets sacked. Then by 476, the last emperor in the West is just gone, kicked off the throne. By the year 500, you're looking at a completely different Europe. This is not some slow, gentle fade to black. This was a century of absolute earth-shattering change.
So how on earth do you make sense of that much chaos? Well, here's the big idea for our whole discussion today. The best way to understand this period isn't to think of it as a collapse. No, think of it more like a recipe. A really complicated, messy, sometimes violent recipe for sure. But it's about mixing three totally distinct, super powerful ingredients to cook up an entirely new world.
All right, so ingredient number one in our big historical recipe, it's the Roman legacy. I love this subtitle, The Ghost of the Empire. It's perfect, because even after the emperors were gone, after the legions had disbanded, Rome itself, it didn't really die. Its ideas, its structures, they were all still hanging around, kind of haunting the landscape, like this powerful echo of what used to be.
And this wasn't just some fuzzy, nostalgic feeling. No way. This legacy was super concrete. Rome left behind a blueprint for how to run a civilization. So, you've got a common legal framework. This radical idea that laws should rule not just the strongest guy with a sword. It left behind Latin, which became the language for anyone educated. Its roads and cities, even falling apart, they were the literal backbone of the continent. And maybe the most powerful thing it left behind was the idea of a single, unified empire. That dream of unity, it would obsess rulers for the next 1,000 years.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The dream of Rome never died, it just changed hands. And that is so true. For the next millennium, you've got major players, everyone from Charlemagne all the way to Napoleon, who were totally obsessed with this idea, constantly trying to put that Roman puzzle back together again.
Okay, let's talk about our second key ingredient, a new faith. This is huge. The rise of Christianity wasn't just a religious movement, not even close. It was a massive social and political revolution that basically became the glue holding this new world together.
Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. As the Roman government started to crumble and fall apart, there was this huge power vacuum. But here's the thing. Another structure was already there, ready to step in. The early church had built its own entire administrative system, its own social safety net, almost like it grew right inside the empty shell of the old empire. So when the Roman officials packed up and left town, who was still there? The local bishop. And he became the new source of authority, of order, of identity.
So what did this new church structure actually provide? Well, for starters, it gave people a shared identity that was bigger than just their local tribe or kingdom. They were all part of Christendom. It also provided that ready-to-go network for running things. It offered a brand new moral compass for society. And in its monasteries, it acted like the world's most important library, saving all that ancient knowledge from being lost forever in the chaos. All right, time for our third and final ingredient, and this one's a real game changer, the Germanic tribes. Now, we call them the barbarian infusion, and that word comes with a lot of baggage, right? But these groups brought a totally new kind of energy, a completely different set of rules to the whole recipe. Because it's so easy to just write these guys off as destroyers. And yeah, they did sack cities, they did topple the emperor, but that is barely half the story. They weren't just tearing things down, they were building something completely new, with a totally different vision for how the world should work. So, what was their big contribution? Well, yeah, a strong warrior culture for sure, but the really important part was their idea of social glue. See, for a Roman, you were a citizen of this huge abstract thing called the empire. For a Germanic warrior, that meant nothing.
What mattered was your personal, sworn, unbreakable oath of loyalty to your leader. I mean, think about that. It wasn't about patriotism to a flag. It was about loyalty to a person. And that single idea, that intense, personal bond, would become the absolute foundation of the entire medieval world. That's feudalism, right there.
Okay, let's do a quick recap. We've got our 3 ingredients: the lingering ghost of Rome, the rising power of the church, and the personal loyalty of the Germanic tribes. So now for the really cool part, the medieval remix. Let's see what happens when you throw all of that into a pot and stir.
And this right here just lays it all out, plain and simple. On the left, you've got the old Roman world. You answer to the emperor. You have the Senate, professional armies, and the idea of citizenship. Now, look to the right. That's the new medieval world. The emperor, he's replaced by a Germanic king. The legions, they're replaced by guys who've sworn a feudal oath. And the whole idea of citizenship, that gets replaced by intensely personal loyalty. This isn't just a small change. It's a complete rewiring of society from the ground up.
This table is awesome because it shows exactly how the fusion happened. Let's just take a look at kingship. A medieval king wasn't just one thing, he was a hybrid. From the Germanic side, he was a warrior chief. From the Roman side, he borrowed these big fancy titles like emperor to sound legitimate. And from the church, he got the idea that God himself wanted him to be king, the divine right to rule. And you see the same pattern with law. You get a mashup of written Roman codes, Germanic traditions, and the church's own laws. Every single major institution was this wild fusion of all 3 ingredients.
And the world that was cooked up from this recipe, it wasn't some short-lived experiment. We're talking about a civilization that would shape the Western world for more than 1,500 years. And honestly, its influence is nowhere close to being over. So that brings us to the big so what question, right? Why does any of this matter today? Why should we care about this 1,500-year-old recipe?
The answer is simple. We are still living in the house that this recipe built. I mean, think about it. The Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, they're basically just modern versions of Latin. The way the Catholic Church is organized around the world, that's a direct copy of the Roman administrative map. Even our legal systems today are this complex mix of Roman written law and Germanic traditions. The echoes of that remix are literally everywhere.
Which kind of leaves us with one final big idea to chew on. If every civilization is just a remix of what came before, it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What are the big ingredients in our world today? What are the old legacies, the new powerful structures, and the dynamic new forces that are all being mixed together right now, cooking up the world of tomorrow? Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.